Welcome to Ring Chronicles. I'm Lance Vaughn, and I'm here with Glenn Ritchie.
Hey.
What's going on? This is the first episode of the podcast. We kind of got this started by when I shared a video of it was a compilation video that somebody had put together of the WWE unveiling new championship titles or new belts, and it was the same belt over and over. It was pretty funny.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, but that kind of got us talking about championship titles, championship lineages, and things like that. So here we are about 3 or 4 weeks later.
Right. Maybe we should do a quick introduction about
Sure.
who we are and all that.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, well, I'm Glenn Ritchie, as he said, and basically I am a mega fan, super fan, whatever you want to call it.
We're a couple of marks.
Yeah, we're marks. yeah. I've been a fan since as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
One of my earliest childhood memories was The Undertaker putting the Ultimate Warrior in an airtight casket and suffocating him.
Nice.
I grew up with wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
I've also worked in the business a little bit on the local, regional, indie scene for a couple different organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I was mostly an announcer. I also did work as a manager, as a kayfabe general manager, owner/owner. I did the music for the guys. I did just about everything besides referee and wrestle. So that's pretty much my history with the business.
You did take a chair shot, though, right?
That was in my backyard wrestling.
Oh,
days.
okay. I didn't know we were going to get into that. Okay.
That was another thing that I did. I had a character called the Idol.
Yeah.
And I was a backyard wrestler, and I got hit in the head with a steel chair.
All right.
At least once.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my back is probably destroyed from that. It was pretty dumb.
Yeah. All right. I'm not anywhere near a biggest fan as Glenn, and I don't claim to be. That would be disrespectful. I'll tell you how I got started watching wrestling. I'm a bandwagon jumper, I admit, but I never stopped watching after that. And I'll tell you, the very first episode I ever saw of any wrestling show was the Bang 316 episode of Raw.
Dang.
So
That's a good one.
I had no chance of not being a wrestling fan after watching that.
Yeah. That was it. That was the
They
hook.
fucking hooked me right there. I mean, I had no chance. That's how I got started watching wrestling, and I became a mark like Glenn and some of our other friends who may come on to the show later. Pretty good introductions. But
and just for the record, this show is not kid friendly. So we've already had an F-bomb drop. So hide your kids.
Yep. All right, so let's get started. How about you tell us why championship lineages are important?
Well, Lance, championship lineages are important because wrestling is important.
That's right.
Wrestling is important because there are men and women that travel the entire globe putting their bodies and lives on the line every single day for our entertainment. There are people that make a living off of this business. There's fans whose lives are brightened by this business. You know, think about all the Make-A-Wish kids that, they could have asked for anything, and they asked for, John Cena or Hulk Hogan or whatever.
Right.
So wrestling's important. I mean, it ranks up there as one of the most important things in my life. I mean, shoot, it trumps a lot of things that it probably shouldn't. I don't mean to get all, it's still real to me, damn it, on everybody. But when I grew up, I thought it was real.
Right.
Back then it was still kayfabe and, Now I know, actually knowing what I know about the business now, it's even more real to me, you know. Knowing that, I mean, when was the last time you saw someone to get their eye punched out in a basketball match, or you know, got thrown off of a 40-foot, you know, scaffold or something,
right?
You know, in a you know, golf game,
right?
You know, so it's wrestling's important. Okay, so one of the things about championships that I often hear, one of the criticisms about championships, is some people say that they don't matter as much as people think they do. I really disagree with that.
Okay.
Almost all of the greatest main event matches in wrestling history have involved a championship, the majority of them, you know. Yeah, imagine a WrestleMania main event that didn't have a world title or a heavyweight, you know, world level title.
It sells
Universal,
tickets.
Whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it sells tickets. It looks good around the person's waist, if it's a good-looking title, that is.
Yeah. There's been some bad ones.
There's been some bad ones, and there's been some great ones. And the lineages are important because those bring prestige to the title. Like, one of the main things that I really think the WWE missed the mark on was when they developed this new world title that Seth Rollins currently has. It looks like the big gold belt, but it's not. It doesn't carry the lineage of the World Heavyweight Championship from 2002 to 2013. That was a mistake, you know, because if you would have kept that lineage, you could say that title had a lineage going back to 1905 with George Hackenschmidt.
Right.
And they missed the mark. They created a new world title. There's 3 of them. Well, 4 of them. And because you got the Universal title, the WWE title, the undisputed, you know, yada 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 title they came out with, and now they got Seth Rollins' belt. I mean, they got 4 of these boogers around, and it just, they could have done something more with it. Okay, so the lineages are also capable of being damaged. And that's another reason why they're important. We must protect the lineage. We're probably going to do an entire show on, like, bad champions at some point.
Are you talking about David Arquette?
Well, that's coming to mind, but also Vince McMahon, who won both the WWE title and the ECW title and the new ECW. So, the thing about David Arquette, much respect to the guy, because he later, like, went back into wrestling and, like, fought that Nick Gage guy, the guy, the deathmatch dude or whatever. And, you know, had his great indie career, was in the PWI 500. Much respect to David Arquette. So nothing I'm saying now is meant to disrespect David Arquette as a person. He donated his earnings to, like, the families of, like, I think Brian Pillman and Owen Hart or something like that.
Right.
If I remember correctly. No disrespect to David Arquette as a person. I have the utmost respect for him. But that was an abomination. And people brought up how David Arquette had the title that dated back, had the one of the clearest claims to dating back to 1905 out of all belts.
Right.
It was probably, I mean, obviously the NWA title has maybe the most direct lineage to 1905, the original World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship. But the WCW title had more prestige, and it also shared that lineage. And then David Arquette won that belt. And Vince McMahon winning the WWE title was bad too, but at least Vince McMahon was like the biggest heel in the company at the time. I kind of understood it a little bit more than I did the David Arquette situation. But but there's other blemishes on on the lineage besides just those two. So lineages are important because we have to protect them. As much as I'm an AEW critic, they've done a pretty good job of protecting their lineage, even though it's a new title.
Right.
They've given it to like top guys that brought prestige to the title.
Right.
They didn't have Tony Khan win the title.
Right.
They didn't pick some celebrity off the street to win the title.
Yeah.
There's been none of that. Everybody that they've pushed to win that title, I can't say was any of them were like a bad decision.
Right.
So even
and they started it off very well with Chris Jericho.
Yeah.
I mean that's the best guy you could have kick off that title.
Yeah, that guy beat Steve Austin and The Rock.
Right.
And he put two belts together.
Right.
So, speaking of wrestling lineages, that was a major event in wrestling lineages when Chris Jericho did that. And then he goes to AEW. And that's what happened.
Right.
So, it was a big deal with Jericho, like you said, being the first one. And I'll admit I'm not as up to date on AEW as I am on the WWE. I'm primarily a WWE fan, but I respect what they've done with the belt. Now, some of the other stuff, not so much, but we won't go into that right now. There's a lot of stuff there that I could talk about.
Right.
Wrestling lineages in the past were really big deals. I mean, you had champions that defended the titles. For example, Bruno Sammartino.
Okay.
He's been brought up a lot lately because of Roman Reigns and how long he's held, the championship in the WWE. And he gets compared to like, Hulk Hogan and Bob Backlund and Bruno Sammartino and all that. The thing is, Bruno Sammartino defended the belt all the freaking time.
Okay.
It was a different world back then.
It was like a weekly defense?
I would say more than that.
Oh, wow.
If my memory serves correctly. I don't know how often, but it was frequent. I mean, it wasn't like Roman Reigns defending the belt average every 3 months or whatever.
Yep.
But with that being said, even though Roman's championship reign isn't, in my view, as prestigious as Bruno Sammartino's reign was, I watched Roman Reigns defend the Universal title against Finn Balor in person.
Right.
I felt like I was a part of history by watching this match. I was hoping to God that Finn Balor would win the match only because I wanted to witness a title change.
Right.
It didn't happen.
Right.
Roman Reigns kept the belt. He still has it.
Right.
That was years ago that I saw that match. But that match was the thing that I remember the most from that SmackDown event.
Right.
And it's still the thing that sticks with me to this day whenever people talk about Roman Reigns' historic reign.
Right.
I saw the match that he defended the belt against Finn Balor. So I know I went all over the place with my answer, but I think this is the most important question. Why is this shit important?
Right.
And I feel like I've really explained it. We've got right now we've got 3 titles that can claim heritage to the World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship held by George Hackenschmidt in 1905.
Okay, what are those?
The whatever you call it, the WWE. Well, the WWE Championship.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like the undisputed WWE Universal Championship.
Okay.
If I got it right.
Right.
But for I don't know how true these rumors are, but I heard rumors that when Roman drops the belt, it's going to just be the WWE Championship at that point. The WWE Championship is the one that has the lineage, not the Universal title. They both maintain their own separate lineages right now.
But doesn't Roman Reigns currently carry around 3 different belts?
Yes.
Okay, what are those belts?
It's a WWE Championship.
Okay, which is the one that has the lineage going back to 1905?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Universal Championship.
Which is new. That's something
New-ish.
they invented.
Yeah.
Okay.
Newish.
Okay.
And, it was invented. No heritage, no lineage, nothing.
Vince pulled it out of his ass.
Yeah, he just pulled it right out of his ass.
Okay.
And here's a belt, and they cleaned it up real good and gave it to somebody.
Okay.
And then, okay, the Universal title. You had really good champions. The people that held it, you know, of course, some of them are controversial, like Goldberg or whatever. But you had Kevin Owens. Unfortunately, Finn Balor only held it for like a day.
Right.
There's a third belt which represents the 2 belts. I know it's confusing as hell.
Okay.
But it represents the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. So it represents both belts.
So you have a belt or 2 belts?
Yes. And he carries around 3 belts.
I don't understand this.
I don't like it either, especially when I first saw the belt. I thought the belt was a unification title, and they were unifying the Universal Championship with the WWE Championship, okay?
Right.
And I'm shortening these. They're technically the WWE, Heavyweight Championship and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so I just want to say that I have not watched WWE regularly since about 2010. So I'm learning things here.
Okay. Well, actually, I think the WWE Championship may be called the WWE Championship. I'd have to look it up for sure to be sure. I didn't do my research in the present day.
Okay.
And that's another thing about the WWE title that's confusing. They call it the WWE Championship, but if you look on the belt, it has the word world on the belt.
Okay.
So it's not called the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. So they don't even have their shit straighten up.
Sounds like they don't know what they're doing either.
There's a lot of things that are confusing about it. But there's 3 belts. There's 3 belts right now. Okay, the other 2 belts that claim a lineage, the other one's Impact. Impact is still around.
I need you to explain this one. I did not know. Okay, how does so you're saying the current Impact World Championship can be traced back to 1905.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the NWA was involved with TNA.
Right.
And that belt has the lineage until it splintered off from the NWA, from Impact and all that.
Right.
But when Impact was TNA, the NWA, was the belt, and the Impact titles has splintered off from that belt.
Okay. So when it was called NWA TNA when it first started. So when they started that, the World Championship belt was the NWA World Championship.
Yeah.
And then when they split off to just TNA and went on their own, what they have right now is what splintered off from that NWA Championship.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's confusing. The third title that can claim a lineage back to 1905 is obviously the NWA.
Well, yeah.
Title.
Right. The 10 pounds of gold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that belt obviously claims a lineage to then. I mean, it always has.
Right.
Which now the NWA is not really a governing body like it used to be. It's like its own indie fed.
Right.
But those 3 belts can claim a lineage back to 1905.
Okay.
That's a big deal.
It is.
Even if you throw in David Arquette, and stuff like that. I mean, it's a big deal.
So you could draw a line starting at 1905, and then it splinters off in 3 ways. to the WWE, TNA, and then NWA
in the present day. But there's other splinterings all over the place.
Get that. That's a given. But just talking about those 3 belts, you have a straight line.
Yeah,
and
you have
3
a straight
lines
line.
coming off that one line. Okay.
You have a straight. Yeah. If the lineages were drawn out like a family tree, like if you go to the Wikipedia, if you look up the World Heavyweight Championship on Wikipedia,
right,
there is a brilliant diagram. Now it doesn't have NWA and TNA on there, like current day on there.
Right.
There's things that are not on this diagram, but it was developed by Triple H Pedigree. I don't know what his real name is, but that's his Wikipedia name.
Okay.
And that's another thing too, guys. A lot of my knowledge is just stuff that comes from my head. But if I actually, there was things I did to refresh my knowledge. If I found a source, I'm gonna give you the source.
Okay.
Where you can look it up yourself.
Right.
And yes, I did do Wikipedia for a lot of this stuff. But to be honest with you, it has the biggest, most vast amount of wrestling knowledge that you can find for free,
right,
in the world. And we're not doing a NASA launch, so if something's a little bit off, that's okay. Send us an email, hit us up on social media, tell us we're wrong.
Yeah,
please. Yeah, make it a controversy and bring it to our attention.
If you're pissed off, let us know you're pissed off. If you think Glenn's a dumbass, say so, and then Glenn will retaliate, I'm sure.
Yeah. Tell me I'm a dumbass, and I'll let you know what I think about you. Send me a picture so I can roast you. I'll make a lot of assumptions about you and your character and the people you associate with.
He'll cut a promo on you.
Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah. If you think something I said is wrong or incorrect or whatever, please let me know. Because, I'm going to make mistakes. The more we do this, the more likely I'm going to make mistakes. So, all right, let's jump in. Are you ready to jump into this, Lance?
I am. Let's go.
Okay, so
I want to hear this shit.
The World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship. That was the first world title. Okay. Now, once again, if you go on Wikipedia, you can find a whole bunch of information about the lineages. They cite newspaper articles. Like I saw a citation for Jim Londos when he won, I think it was 1938. He won the championship, and it was something in the New York Times at the time. I just thought that was insanity that you could find newspaper articles that mention wrestling content from that long ago.
Right.
So there's just so much stuff on there. And listeners, if y'all want me to go through and really dig deep into that early wrestling, like actual who won the belt from who and what was the circumstances, I'll see what I can find out. But for today, we're just kind of focusing on the general lineage of what belt led to what belt. Not so much on the individual matches where the championship changed hands and stuff like that. And there's a million titles out there. And I also want to explain that we're also going to be looking at women's titles. So I don't want to be, exclusive towards that. But obviously when we're talking about the history of professional wrestling, the men's title is the one that has, the most lineages and branches and longevity. So we're focusing on that first. The women's titles have, started and stopped and done a lot of other things too. It's a little bit more complicated, although it's extremely interesting too. Moolah actually selling the rights to her title to Vince McMahon and stuff like that.
Right.
It's very interesting. So, all right. So there was a book that was cited by Wikipedia a lot on this stuff that I'm talking about right now. And it was called, it's by a guy named Beekman, and he wrote it in 2006 called A History of Professional Wrestling in America. Okay. And he describes in detail what the atmosphere was back then, what was going on with wrestling back then, what was the content. And it's an expensive book, but I mean, if this is interesting to you, I would definitely say get it. I think it was like on Amazon, like $55, but I think maybe you might be able to get it cheaper if you go Kindle route or something like that. But anyways, he explained that back then, matches in wrestling started off as legitimate matches, you know, with the catch wrestling style.
Right.
Which I did some research on that too, and like the catch wrestling style is still a thing. Like what's her name? Dadgummit, the name slipped on my mind. Anyway, I'll think of it later. But Ronda Rousey's partner, that is, I'll have to look it up. But anyways, her name is slipping my mind right now. She even betrayed her recently and all this other stuff. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Send me a hate mail and say, why did you forget her name? But anyway, she was trained in like the catch wrestling. You know, Steven Regal, William Regal.
Right.
He was trained in catch wrestling. It's a style of wrestling, you know, involves submissions and things like that. And so wrestling's popularity rose after the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln wrestled, okay?
Okay.
So he was a wrestler. We're not going to get into politics, but
no, we're not.
But Abraham Lincoln was a wrestler.
All right.
Okay. And the original and historic World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship was to identify that guy that was the catch can wrestler. And I got that information from Wikipedia. So wrestling eventually started to incorporate worked matches, okay? And Beekman explained that work matches were less risky. They were shorter, which was better for schedules, for aging wrestlers, he explains. And he also said that fans prefer the shorter matches, okay? So one of the things was that wrestling was heavily influenced by carnival culture, okay? And this is another thing that Beekman explains. So basically, this is where the term mark came from, okay? This is, so when we say we're marks, this is how this has got started. And,
right.
You know, even though I was involved in like the indie wrestling, I still consider myself a mark more than anything. In wrestling back then, they would have a champion, and the champion would be this badass, okay? And, well, before we get too deep in this, I got to explain. We need to talk about hookers, Lance.
I love hookers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to talk about hookers.
Okay. I want to hear everything there is about hookers.
I wish I was a hooker.
Me too. Hookers are badass.
So hookers back then were that was the term used to describe a badass that the fans and the audience at the carnivals could challenge.
Okay.
That was a hooker.
Okay.
Nowadays you hear the term shooter mostly for a guy that can actually fight.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, you know, basically you know, a hooker would be like someone like Ming.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like if we were to get like Ming to wrestle the audience members, you know, didn't he like rip off like appendages or something like that in airports or something? I don't know. Yeah, something like that. I'm joking, but he might have done some terrible damage to some people. I mean, I know he did. There's tales. You can just Google it or look it up on YouTube.
Oh yeah, sure.
So, anyways, the hooker was this badass dude, okay, that could just wipe out everybody, okay. Right. But what they would do is they would have some guy that didn't look that imposing or whatever, or, whatever. They just picked a guy.
Right.
That could be one of the things they would do. But they would pick a guy to just go in there and beat this dude. And it was rigged. And they were like, the fans would be like, yeah, man, like, look at that champion's not all that. Like, know. So that it'd be kind of like taking like Gilbert to like fight like Brock Lesnar.
Okay.
And Gilbert goes over.
Right.
And you think, man, Brock Lesnar's just a musclehead. He's not really that good of a fighter.
Right.
And then you would pay them to
because
fight.
the audience would then think that they have a chance to beat the champion.
Yeah, yeah. They think they've got it. So they would pay money to have a chance to fight the champion for, a bigger prize.
Right.
And then the champion would go Brock Lesnar on them.
Right.
And just kill them.
Right.
And they're dead. And they got your money. So, like, we got your money,
Right.
I mean, it's like, we still have all your fucking money.
Yes. And you're dead.
And you're dead. And, I mean, back then there wasn't lawsuits or anything like that. So it was, that was it. That was how wrestlers started working the crowds. And the audience members were called marks because they were targets to be duped. So that's how marks came into the fray.
Right.
And that's how we got hookers started in wrestling.
All right.
Okay.
And that's how we got worked matches.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the beginning of it. And then, like I said earlier, what Beekman was saying as far as the promoters recognized that the work matches were less risky. Yeah, speaking of that, I've got a comment on that.
Okay.
We've done a full, I don't know, 360, 180, whatever, on this particular issue.
Right.
So the promoters back then, or, the whatever you would call them back then, they probably didn't use the term promoters, but whatever they were called back then, the people that ran the business.
Yep.
They rigged wrestling to make it less risky.
Okay.
Catch wrestling involves a lot of like very serious holds, but you could rig the hold to make it look like it's being applied when it's not really actually hurting, and the guy could sell it.
Yep.
Now look at wrestling. Instead of it being less risky, it's even more risky.
Yeah.
You've got people jumping backwards off a top rope on the concrete floors. You've got people jumping through tables. There's a dive every single match.
Yep.
You got 300, 400-pound men doing dives.
Yeah.
You had Top Dollar do a dive. I know you don't know who Top Dollar is.
No, I don't know who that is.
But he's a guy that looks like he's a big guy. He's a husky guy, and he was doing this dive, and his belly like flopped on the top rope, and like it kind of launched him. And anyway, you got all this insanity that's taking place these days in wrestling. This dangerous stuff.
Yep.
And I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm a fan of Jim Cornette's podcast, and I recommend listening to the part where he talks about all the moves that have been banned in AEW now.
Okay.
They're trying to mitigate their own risk.
Right.
So there's all this risk involved, but originally wrestling was rigged to decrease the risk.
Yep.
And
now we've gone full circle or what?
Yeah. I mean,
it became even more dangerous than real fighting.
Right.
It's probably less dangerous to get knocked out than it is to, just by a punch than, dive off a 20-foot scalpel onto your skull.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
like a Matt Hardy.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyways, going back to wrestling history, by the turn of the century, most matches were worked. Beekman explains that that journalists started to expose this over time.
Mm-hmm.
There was another book that I found in Wikipedia, through Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
It was by Lou Thez.
Right, yeah.
And
was he a hooker?
He was a hooker.
Okay.
In fact, the name of the book is called Hooker, an authentic wrestler's adventure inside the bizarre world of professional wrestling.
God damn.
He was a hooker.
I just didn't know Luthez was a hooker.
Yeah,
okay.
He was a hooker.
Okay.
And it was also written by with Kit Bauman. I don't know if Kit Bauman. If you hear this and I butchered your name, please send me an email or Instagram message and let me know that I butchered your name. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
The book is a biography, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how it's a biography if Luthez is, like writing the book with the ghostwriter or whatever the situation is. Or it wasn't a ghostwriter, his name's on the book. But anyways, Luthez recalled between 1915 and then in 1920, there was a ton of exposés about wrestling that really damaged the business. But instead of like going back on this and making it more legitimate,
right,
they went deeper into the fakery.
Okay.
like they're like,
so they're even more work than they were before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you go to the professional wrestling article of Wikipedia, it has a part where it talks about so I don't know who wrote this, but because it didn't cite it, but it talked about reasons why professional wrestling was rigged. And by the way, when I use the word fake, I want to be clear. I'm not insulting the business. I understand that eyes get punched out and like people get paralyzed. I mean, poor Draws died, and he was like 50-something years old. You know that had to have something to do with his injuries. I mean, he would have lived a lot longer if it wasn't for that.
Right.
So I mean, it's fake, but it's real. The part that's fake is, when Triple H drugged up Stephanie McMahon and took her to get married, none of the fans called the police.
Right.
When 6 months later, Stephanie McMahon was like, "Oh, I'm evil too."
Yeah.
Nobody questioned it,
right?
Because wrestling is fake.
Yeah.
I kind of borrowed that from
it's a show.
From a YouTube video. Wrestling isn't wrestling. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's really good. It's really good. I showed it to one of my ex-girlfriends that made the mistake of expressing mild interest in learning something about professional wrestling around me.
Yeah.
I had another ex that had somebody mention to her Big Van Vader, and she got a 45-minute story about his injuries that were inflicted on him.
Yep, good job.
Injuries inflicted on others, championship victories across the globe. I'm getting off topic, but so boxing, wrestling is more entertaining when it's rigged, while boxing would not be more entertaining if it was rigged.
Right.
Also, in boxing, whoever loses has to take a real beating for the defeat to be convincing.
Right.
But wrestling holds can be rigged convincingly without actually causing injury. A boxer's less likely to take a fake beating.
Right.
Because it's going to look bad. It's going to hurt. And that's how wrestling went in the route that it went into, and boxing stayed legitimate.
Right.
Okay. Another thing that was a thing back then was double crosses. I honestly don't understand why double crosses are not still a thing.
Okay.
As much as they used to be back then. Although back then there were severe penalties for double crossing, but
right.
Now there's probably like legal stuff. There probably was back then too, but but anyway, Luthez in the book Hooker explains that if a shoot match was done in public, it was often the result of a double cross.
Okay.
And this whole thing stuck around in wrestling for a long, long, long time. Even into the modern era, a lot of the old school wrestling trainers said, you would have to be a good wrestler, because what happens if somebody tries to throw your match?
Right.
That was a belief by some promoters, some wrestlers, obviously. They wanted their champion to be a legitimate shoot fighter, so that they could actually, shoot if they had to.
Yep.
If the opponent tried to throw the match, and actually double crosses still have happened. Of course, we all know about the Montreal screw job.
Of course.
There's also Wendy Richter and the Fabulous Moolah. And then there were also screw jobs that almost happened that we don't know about. Like this isn't who knows what the truth is on this, but according to the Iron Sheik, Vern Gagne was like offering him like a bunch of stuff to like break Hulk Hogan's leg in his championship loss to Hogan.
Okay.
So double crosses. That's when wrestling gets like legitimate. Luthez also said that sometimes shoot matches were performed to deal with disputes, things like that. So in the early days of wrestling, you had what Beekman described as cartels, promotional cartels for wrestling in the 1910s in the East Coast. He said that Wrestling Center was in the heartland in the Midwest. And
it sounds like a territory.
Yeah, it's
kind of the start of the territories.
I mean, that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
He used the word cartel, but I mean that sounds like a territory.
That's a territory, yeah.
Yeah. So they fully rigged it. They would make their most charismatic wrestlers the champions,
right,
instead of their best wrestlers. Like in WCW in the 90s, if they actually put the belt on the best fighter wrestler, Ming would have had the belt the whole time.
Right.
Nobody would have beaten Ming.
Right.
I mean, Ming bit off people's noses and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Like Ming was somebody you didn't fight. Okay. Hogan never would have won the belt. Sting would have never won the belt. Goldberg would have never won the belt.
Right.
Kevin Nash, none of them. It would have been Ming.
Right.
Okay. In the 80s, it would have been probably Hardy Race. He would have kept the belt forever.
And then probably Ken Shamrock when he was in the WWE.
Yeah. And like now Brock Lesnar,
right.
would have it.
Right.
Shayna Baszler. That's her name. She's MMA fighter, but she was also trained in catch wrestling. She was the one I was trying to think of.
Oh, okay.
All right. Anyways,
glad we got that out of the way.
Yeah. So, they also said that Beekman also explains that rigging the matches also gave promoters the chance to make long-term plans. So this is the beginning of like long-term storytelling angles and that's the early
this is booking. This sounds like full on running a wrestling company.
Yeah. It's very primitive, but it's the beginning of it.
Sounds like the foundation.
The foundations.
And this was in the 1910s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beekman also explains that challengers for the title would have a policeman. Okay. And
Like an escort?
okay, so a policeman. We're done talking about hookers and escorts.
Damn, I thought we were on to something here. I just thought everything was based around hookers and...
Well, the escort is actually kind of a good analogy to it because the policeman would protect the champion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Goldberg stole this.
You know,
it just had several.
Like he had. What do you mean?
When he came out to the ring and he had all the security around.
Oh
him
yeah. That, okay, I get. I was thinking of like actual policemen according to Beekman here, and you're talking about like the security guards and that followed him from his locker room or whatever.
Oh. Man.
So the policeman was a legitimate fighter that you had to go through first to get a match with the champion.
Okay.
So if we used the WCW in the 90s example, we would talk about like Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hogan's the champion, but you got to fight Ming to get to him.
Okay.
You're not getting past Ming.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that was a policeman back in those days.
I was way off.
So I wrote here the legacy of wanting a wrestler who could handle themselves well in a shoot carried well into the modern era of wrestling before it was completely gone. And I quoted myself. That was from me.
All right. Give yourself some credit.
So also back then in the early days of wrestling, because this belt, by the way, I should probably explain, lasted all the way to 1957. So this belt from 1905 to 1957.
It was the same championship.
It was the same championship. This belt had a 50-year lineage. So I'm blazing through 50 years like it's nothing here.
Right. Same belt, same. I mean, maybe not same physical belt, but
yes, same lineage.
Right.
And once again, if we get listeners that want me to like dive into this and talk about matches that happen in like the 20s and the 30s and all that kind of stuff, we can go into that. Wrestling became big when television became big.
Yeah.
One thing that about wrestling is that it's very, very cheap to produce.
Okay.
It costs a lot less than a television show or something like that.
Yep.
So wrestling is, and that's part of the reason why wrestling is still making so much money now, even though the ratings are down, is because it's cheap to produce. It's a cheap purchase. It still has relatively good ratings compared to other things on television, on cable.
Sure.
And also, it's live. And so that encourages people to watch it as it happens, which discourages the uses of DVRs so that people are going to actually watch the commercials. So it's more valuable for those reasons. So, but back then, wrestling was just something that was, pretty cheap to buy that you could put on television.
Right.
And like Lou Thesz he was like the Hulk Hogan of his day. I mean, he was the big guy. Anyway, Lou Thesz is more than just the guy that gave the name for the move that Stone Cold Steve Austin does.
Right.
He was the biggest star and the first like major like television star in wrestling history.
And when did that start?
Well, when television started.
Okay.
I mean, basically, wrestling has been around on television about as long as televisions have been out there.
Right.
So, Gorgeous George was also a big name back then. He was a very charismatic, flamboyant character. I mean, he was one of the first gimmicks when you get into the 30s. You started seeing moves like you would recognize today in wrestling. So up until the 30s, it looked very much like catch wrestling.
Right.
Okay. You get into the 30s, you start seeing moves like the body slam and things like that. You get into the 40s, you get into wrestling being on television because people started getting televisions. 50s, so Luthez was that guy, and he was around for a very long time. There were territorial disputes even back in this 50-year period between 1905 and 1957 with the World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship. And the reigns of that belt, like in the diagram that I mentioned earlier from Triple H pedigree, you can find on Wikipedia for the World Heavyweight Championship. The reigns for that belt partially merged with what would become the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. So that belt, which began in 1948, if I can read my handwriting or the print, 1948 until obviously the present day was that particular title. So NWA World Heavyweight Championship. So if you go to natwrestlingalliance.wordpress.com/world -title -history / which I don't know what exactly that website was. Looked like just a wrestling. It just had the NWA, National Wrestling Alliance World Title History. It said that it recognizes the final reigns of the World Heavyweight Championship as their own. The diagram says partially that's the case.
Right.
That'd be something I would probably have to look up to get some more information on. So I got some mixed information on that. But there's some the main thing you need to know is there is direct overlap between the original World Heavyweight Championship and the NWA World Heavyweight Championship.
Yep.
And the World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship ended in 1957, and the NWA continued. The NWA still exists.
Yes.
Like, isn't that just insane?
Yep.
I just, of course, in the 80s, late 80s, the NWA became very troubled. But it's just insane to consider that the NWA still exists.
Yep.
And like I mentioned Impact earlier.
Yeah.
Impact has existed longer than WCW did.
Wow. I did not realize that.
Yeah. Think about it. Think about when Impact started.
Yeah, that
Still
was
around.
early 2000s. It's been about 20 years.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't even so WCW didn't even last 20 years.
No.
Wow.
Mind blown, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah.
So the NWA has been around since the late 40s.
Yep.
The Impact's been around for a couple decades now. WCW barely made it.
Wow.
When
That's
was it?
crazy to think. All the names they had.
2001.
All the money they made. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Like when you think about it like that, you realize how much of a disappointment it was.
Yeah.
Overall, that it just folded like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So in 1948, this is from Wikipedia. It's unsighted. NWA was formed as a professional wrestling governing body. NWA World Heavyweight Championship was created that same year. So territories could become a member of the NWA. And these promotions had to recognize the NWA champion as the world champion, but they could also have their own champion.
Right.
Okay. And each of these territories was like, it had its own name. Okay. Nowadays we call this indies, you know, but back then it was territories, and the territories was very closely guarded. Now, if you look up the NWA on Wikipedia, there's a map of like the territories that you can look at, and there's obviously some areas where there's some overlap.
Sure.
And there's some really weird stuff, like Georgia Championship Wrestling had like part of their territory in Ohio. I mean, just weird stuff like that.
Okay.
You know? So, yeah, the territories. So this is when we're getting into the territories. The NWA World Heavyweight Champion would travel to each territory and defend the title against the top contender or champion of that territory. And the world champion was to make that guy look good, okay? And but still hold the title.
Sure.
You know. And the board of directors, which was mostly territory owners, decided when the title changed hands via a vote. Okay, this is something a lot of people don't realize. The WWF, when it separated, I'm going to get into that in a minute.
Okay.
Depending on how long this goes. When it splintered off and did its own thing, they were still involved in on good terms with the NWA up until about 1983 when Vince McMahon Jr. Decided to go nuclear war and blow up everything.
Right.
So even the AWA was on very friendly terms with the NWA. So even though you had the AWA splinter off, and then you had the WWF splinter off from, you know, Capital Wrestling, and they declared their champions as world champions, they were still on good terms with the NWA. So the NWA ruled wrestling until Vince Jr. went nuclear. Okay. So, by the late 50s, the system started having problems. Luthez held the belt, but Vergagna was frustrated with what was going on.
Right.
Disputes about number of appearances of the champion, and in different regions and so forth. Okay, so according to if you go to the Wikipedia article, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship article, it says in June 14th of 1957 in Chicago, Thesz defended the title against, I'm going to try to get this correct, Edouard Carpentier. If I heard, that's how I heard it being pronounced when I looked it up online.
Okay.
In a 2 out of 3 falls match. Thesz and Carpentier split the first 2 falls. In the third fall, Thesz was disqualified. The NWA later voided the change, reversed it based on disqualification. Then Thesz defeated Carpentier by disqualification in a Montreal match on the July 24th. The plan was to present Thesz and Carpentier as rival champions in different cities. Carpentier would also make appearances in the U.S. as champion, while Thesz was on an overseas tour.
Right.
So anyway, as a result of the various disputes within the NWA, Carpentier's manager, promoter, Eddie Quinn, left in August, making Carpentier unavailable to work in the NWA. So the organization dealt with it by saying, hey, after his win, we don't recognize his win. It never recognized it.
Right.
And Quinn started promoting him as the true NWA World Heavyweight Champion based on the match with Thesz.
Right.
In 1958, Quinn started, entertaining the idea of using Carpentier as a way to leave the NWA. And a victory over Carpentier would give that local champion a credible claim to a World Heavyweight Championship victory. And guess what happened? Vern Gagne. Okay.
Are you saying Vern Gagne happened?
Yeah, Vern Gagne happened. So basically there was controversy over who was champion. I mean, just that whole thing that I just described there. I don't even know how well it did. If it was confusing to you, it is because it is confusing. It's illogical and it makes no sense. Okay. But the NWA would do stuff like that. Belts would change hands, and then they would say, nope, that didn't happen. I mean, Ric Flair has held the world title 25 times, technically.
Right.
Okay. But not all of them.
I want to hear
are
some people get
recognized.
pissed off about that.
Yeah, 25 times. Tell me I'm a Glenn. Hey, Glenn, you're an idiot. Don't you know he only won the title 16 times? 16 times. It's on my WWE.com website right here. Somebody call me or message me or whatever about how I'm wrong. That Ric Flair has not held the world title 25 times.
Yes.
Ric Flair only claims 21.
Really?
Yeah, he only claims 21. He could claim 25, but he only claims 21.
Okay. Well, that's okay. Well, that's conservative of him.
Yeah, and the WWE only gives him 16.
Okay.
So the NWA has actually flip-flopped on this about Ric Flair.
Okay.
They've said that some of the stuff that happened between him and Harley Race in Singapore and all that was legitimate changes at times.
Right.
So they've flip-flopped on it. So anyway, because of all this controversy with Carpentier, someone defeating him could potentially claim to be a world heavyweight champion.
Right.
Okay. And so, on my notes here, I say CAWA. So that'll get us to the AWA. But before we get into the AWA, I want to talk a little bit more about the NWA title. The Crown version of the championship debuted in 59. 10 pounds of gold came out in 1973. Presented to Harley Race,
and that's still the current one, isn't it? There's I'm pretty sure.
I think that's the one that they brought back. Yeah.
They brought it. Okay, so it changed, and then they brought it back.
Yeah. Well, then it became the later the NWA title became the big gold belt.
Right.
Yeah. But is that the one that they use now in the NWA and the NWA Power?
I think they do.
The one my phone I left.
It's got like this the dome globe.
Yeah. And it has the flags on it and everything.
Yeah. That's it.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That belt is a classic belt that Harley Race once wore.
Sure.
So the 10 pounds of gold came out in 73. Then you also had a whole bunch of what I was talking about earlier. Ric Flair switches are not recognized by different authorities, or they disagree on the switches. I wrote here, the NWA has occasionally recognized the Flair Race switches that took place in New Zealand and Singapore. This is from Wikipedia. Jim Crockett Promotions, 1985 to 1988. We could probably do a whole episode on Jim Crockett. I mean, those few years, they controlled many territories and made the belt theirs.
Right.
Okay. The big gold version of the belt debuted in 1986 at a championship wrestling from Florida card called Battle of the Belts 2, where NWA World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair defended the title against Barry Windham. That did come from WWE.com.
Okay.
So an article about the 10 greatest championship belts.
Okay.
When I played WWE 2K23, do you think that the belt that Seth Rollins has, do you think I've downloaded that in my game?
Yes.
No.
No, you have not. Okay. Okay. Why?
I use the 10 pounds of gold, or their version of the 10 pounds of gold.
Okay.
The WWE,
right?
You know,
right.
It's not exactly the same. It's got a little WWE logo. It's not
right.
10 pounds of gold. I mean, big gold belt.
The Bill Gold belt.
Yeah, the big gold belt is the best wrestling title that has ever been made as far as aesthetically.
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing.
I agree.
Okay. I don't know what title would come close to that. Lucha Underground has the gift from the Gods belt. That looks awesome.
Okay.
You should check it out.
You got to admit, the AEW belt looks good.
AEW belt looks good.
And right now, that's probably the most similar to the big gold belt right now.
Right now.
I think, yeah.
Right now.
That's probably the most
the
similar.
Seth's belt's right now the most similar because, and Rhea Ripley's belt's the most similar because their belts was modeled after the big gold belt.
Okay. It's based on
the
big gold belt. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it there's a lot of symbolism. It's good belts. They're good belts, but it's not the big gold belt.
Right.
Why, if you're going to bring back the world title, why do you not bring back the big gold belt?
Right.
You've got it. You have it.
Yeah.
You own it, Vince.
Yeah.
Like, this, the last good thing he could do before he croaks is bring back
the big gold belt.
The big gold belt. That is like his last great contribution to society.
Where is it physically? Is it locked up in a safe somewhere? What the fuck do they do with it?
Somebody owns it because the original big gold belt, if you remember, had the top of it was dented.
I seem to recall that.
Get on Peacock.
Okay.
And look in WCW.
Okay.
Like during the NWO era.
Right.
And look at the big gold belt. The top of it was dented. Somebody dropped it.
Okay.
And it dented it. And they just said, we're going to keep wearing this belt.
Okay.
And then towards the end of WCW, when everything went to hell with Vince Russo and all that. And by the way, we got a friend that's a big, or at least he was a big Vince Russo.
We do. I know that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least he was a big Vince Russo apologetic.
Yeah.
We may bring him on and see if his views have changed over the years.
Let's see if he wants to defend Vince Russo.
Yeah, let's see if he wants to defend Vince Russo
Maybe
in the
he
year
doesn't.
2023. You know, like hindsight in history has not looked fondly on Vince Russo.
Right.
But he may defend him.
He might. I don't know.
He may defend the David Arquette thing. He
might.
Say all that media attention brought prestige to the title or something. I
haven't talked to him in a long time about those things.
Yeah, I haven't either. We need to talk to him eventually.
Yeah,
well, that'll be a future episode.
Sure.
We also got a big AEW mark as a friend too.
Yeah.
And
now I'll go ahead and say I do prefer AEW myself, but I also recognize flaws in the company. I swear to God, if I see one more Tope Suicida, I'm gonna fucking kill somebody. They got that fucking move in every fucking match. God damn it. Anyway,
on the video, have you played the video game yet?
No, I haven't.
I bet like the X button is the Tope Suicida or whatever it is. That's the X button. Like.
Oh God!
And like the circle button is the Spanish fly or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the triangle button's the Canadian destroyer.
Yeah.
Like I bet that's what it is.
R1's the coffin drop.
Yeah.
All right.
Doesn't matter who you're playing as. You do the coffin drop.
Right. God damn.
So,
okay.
just teleport to the top. And you do the coffin.
Oh my god. Oh god damn.
You just teleport to the top and then the coffin.
Yeah. Oh fuck.
So,
Holy shit.
Tope Suicida or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fucking crying.
Me too. Oh god. So,
Oh shit.
I'm a WWE fan. I just like the WWE.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm not going to get much love from the hardcore indie wrestling, inflatable dolls and wrestling. What was it that Kenny Omega did? Wrestle like a girl that was like 6 or 9 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I know that crowd's going to hate me, but
yeah. You're more of a purist.
Yeah. At the same time, though, I cited Cornette earlier. I don't agree with everything that he says either.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has his views on women wrestling. I can't go with.
Oh, absolutely.
I love women's wrestling.
Absolutely.
Anyway, let's get back to the big gold belt. So Jim Crockett Promotions nearly went bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the WWF.
Mm-hmm.
Turner Broadcasting purchased Jim Crockett in 1988 due to high ratings. So, and we all know that story where he calls Vince McMahon and says, "I'm in the wrestling business."
Yeah, and then Vince says, "I'm in the entertainment business."
Yeah.
So he always had that idea of being entertainment, not
yeah.
wrestling.
All right, so let's talk about the AWA recently. And if you want a really good recommendation for like a mini documentary of about the AWA, there's one called The Rise and Fall of the AWA by Cultaholic Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Look it up on YouTube. It is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. It talks about, there was a period of time where the AWA had the best guys. It had the best rookies. They had Hogan. They had Ricky Steamboat. Of course, Vern Gagne and Nick Botwinkle. Both of the Hennings. Father and son came from there.
Yep.
They had everybody.
Mm-hmm.
All the great guys were at one point. AWA had the best roster out of all the promotions. Okay, so reason for the split: Vern Gagne wanted to be the champion. That's what it boils down to.
Right,
and he kept that belt on himself. Now, okay, one of the things about this podcast is I want to offer some different perspectives on different things.
Sure.
And some people might say that Vern Gagne was very selfish to keep the belt on himself so much.
Yep.
But you got to think about it from Vern Gagne's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
If you are worried about, you remember what we talked about double crossing earlier?
Sure.
If you're worried about somebody taking off with your belt, which this stuff happens in wrestling. Mm-hmm. We've seen it happen even in the modern era of wrestling. If you're worried about somebody taking your belt and dragging it to some other promotion and doing things like wearing it on their television show or throwing it in the trash can, all the stuff that actually has happened in wrestling history, who is the person that you're going to trust the most to not do that?
Yourself.
Right. Yeah. So that was brought up in that Cultaholic Wrestling YouTube mini documentary as a justification for why Vern did what he did. So this comes from Wikipedia. The World Heavyweight Championship, which was called the Omaha version, resulted from a defeat of Edouard Carpentier by Vern Gagne, with several NWA affiliates recognizing this as a title change. This disputed version of the NWA World Heavyweight title was later known as the World Heavyweight Championship Omaha version. The title was unified with the AWA World Heavyweight Championship on September the 7th in 1963. Okay.
We could probably do a whole episode on Vern Gagne and him keeping the belt on himself.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you first hear that, you're thinking this guy just wanted to be champion. He just wanted creative control.
Yeah.
So he started a company where he could just make himself champion.
Yeah. Well, see, here's the thing, though. People don't understand that prior to Vince McMahon Jr., Vern Gagne had money coming out of his ass.
Okay. Right out of his ass. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And the thing about it is who's going to complain?
Right.
You know? But that documentary is so good.
Okay.
So good, so good. It talks about how Hulk Hogan actually won the belt, but then they, reversed the decision, and they reversed the decision. Vern Gagne only wanted actual athletes to hold the belt. Wrestlers or Olympic champions, or just, big time athletes. Hulk Hogan was a bodybuilder, that's what he was. He wasn't an athlete. So, at least not in Vern Gagne's eyes. I would say he was an athlete because, in my view, all wrestlers are athletes. But Vern Gagne didn't see that. And Vern Gagne could have had Hulkamania.
Yeah.
And he missed it. He missed Hulkamania. So, at one point, Vern Gagne had money coming out of his ass. He was making so much money that he could put the belt on himself and just keep the belt and hold it and just defeat everybody. And nobody complained because everybody's making money.
Yeah.
To him missing the mark and losing, bleeding money.
Yeah.
And dying. And the AWA title, it claimed a legacy, like what I mentioned earlier today with the Impact title, and the NWA title, and the WWE title. It claimed a lineage dating back to 1905 with George Hackenschmidt.
Okay.
The same belt that Frank Gotch wore. Okay, the lineage. We've got that connection between that belt and the AWA belt.
Yep.
And that title died. It died. It's dead. It ended.
Shit.
So, at least the WCW title kind of lived on, and now that lineage is kind of filtered into the WWE Championship with all the unifications that happen.
Yeah.
Which that could be a whole episode. So also there was another belt that splintered off. It was the Worldwide Wrestling Associates. They had a title, the WWA World Heavyweight Championship, the Los Angeles version.
Okay.
Formed when Carpentier was recognized as NWA World Champion before a gradual splitting off from the NWA in 1961 when Freddie Blassie defeated Carpentier. The title ceased to exist in 1968 when they rejoined the NWA.
Okay.
That come from Wikipedia. So that was a splinter off, and they brought it back. All right, Capital Wrestling Corporation. That sound familiar? Anybody?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They split off due to the number of dates the champion wrestled in their region, and also, disagreements about champion selection issues. Of course, like I said, AWA and these guys, which would become the WWWF, would stay on friendly terms with NWA. The kayfabe reason, is that Buddy Rogers beat Lou Thez in a one fall match instead of a best of 3 match.
And best of 3 matches were the NWA standard for a title match.
Right, right. It was back then. That was normal.
Right.
Okay, so in wrestling today, so that happened in 1963. Okay, so in wrestling today, when I play my video game, the announcer is announcing the match. He says, this bout is for, this match is for one fall.
One fall, yeah.
Okay, and the fans, of course, if you go to like an indie show, they're like, one fall. I was an announcer, and for no apparent reason, I would always make sure that people knew when I was an announcer that the match was for one fall.
Yeah,
every match was for one fall.
Yeah,
I as an announcer in the indies, I never called a match that was 2 out of 3 falls.
Yeah.
Not once.
Right.
You just don't see it.
Yeah.
Every match is one fall.
Yeah.
But they still, it's just a legacy of the old days.
Yeah.
Where title matches were best of 3.
Yeah.
2 out of 3 falls. They clarify how many falls the match is.
Yep.
It's useless now.
Yeah.
They really don't have a need to say it unless it is a 2 out of 3 falls match, which is now basically a gimmick match.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But back then it was the standard.
But also, I really think saying that just has a nice ring to it. It sounds good.
It sounds good. It makes things sound official.
And the way the ring announcers kind of develop the cadence for it. The following contest is scheduled for one fall
with a 15-minute time limit.
Yeah. It just sounds good. And it
does.
Like I mean, if I was a wrestler walking out, I would want to hear that before going out. It just sounds good.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I am by no means advocating for us getting rid of the. I mean, when I was the announcer, I announced that it was for one fall.
Yeah.
I didn't even know why I was doing it. I just did.
Yeah.
And the fans go along with it.
Right.
One fall,
right.
And
well, you could probably go into, should some federations or maybe for some belts should the championship match always be 2 out of 3 falls? Should somebody do that?
Well, imagine if you created like an indie fed, like that could be like one of your. Like, how Ring of Honor had all these rules and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
That made them unique and special.
Right.
That could be one of your rules.
Yeah.
That if I need somebody rich to, like, give me a bunch of money so I can start my own promotion.
Right.
And I would do something like that. I would say every championship match is best out of 3. We're bringing it back.
Yeah.
Or if NWA wants to hire me or whatever, let's bring it back to the NWA. That'd be the best place to do it. Where all this stuff come from. So the WWF, the Capital Wrestling left NWA and became the WWF.
And this was Vince Senior, by the way.
Yeah,
right?
Vince Senior.
Okay.
So we may have some listeners that are not aware of the importance of this. Now, I would imagine most of our listeners are wrestling fans, but we may have some people that aren't wrestling fans or maybe don't know a whole lot. But I feel like I need to clarify the WWWF, Worldwide Wrestling Federation, eventually became the World Wrestling Federation.
Right.
And the World Wrestling Federation eventually became World Wrestling Entertainment.
Right.
Which is the WWE. Okay.
So that company started out as Capital Wrestling.
Capital Wrestling Corporation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
it's just wrestling just goes way back. I mean, even Vince's senior's dad was involved in wrestling. I mean, there's just so much in wrestling history that's just crazy. Like, I saw a match that was the decision was reversed by the National Boxing something or other. Like, what the hell was the National Boxing Alliance or Association regulating wrestling for?
Yeah.
I mean, just crazy stuff happened back a long time ago. All right, so now we're going to talk about WCW. Okay, so going back from the original World Heavyweight Championship in 1905, George Hackenschmidt, we had the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Okay, that started in 1948. And spawning off the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, we had the AWA World Heavyweight Championship. We had the WWF World Heavyweight Championship, also known as the WWF Championship, etc., WWE Championship. And there's belts that have spun off of the WCW title and the WWE title, the WWF title, I should say. Nothing spun out of the AWA. That lineage ended. It died.
It died with the AWA.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we're going to talk more about, probably in the next episode, what happened with the WCW title with the lineage and what happened with the WWF title and its lineage. Okay, but we're going to kind of finish up with WCW here. Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, Turner bought, everything. WCW stayed in the NWA, but Turner slowly phased out the name.
Okay.
Basically, the NWA was about completely dead at this point.
Okay.
It existed on paper. The NWA World Heavyweight Championship became the WCW World Heavyweight Championship by late 1990.
Okay, so at that point, was it actually still the same championship, or was the WCW World Heavyweight Championship splintered off from the NWA Championship?
Okay, so it's about to get really confusing.
Oh, fuck. Okay, here we go.
We're about to get some craziness.
Okay.
So between this point in time in 1994, it's wild.
Okay.
So, and when we get into this part here, like, I actually remember like some of this stuff.
Okay.
Watching. Strangely enough, when I became a wrestling fan, even though I was exposed first to WWF, which is now the WWE, I was originally, when I became a fan, a WCW fan mostly. I loved WCW. And I think that in my eyes, even as a child, WCW looked more legitimate.
Okay.
The WWF, when I was a small child, had like, Doink the Clown, which, the original Doink, Matt Bourne, I think his name is, he was badass. It was a heel Doink.
Okay.
It scared kids. Okay, that was
so
badass.
He was an evil clown.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I played WWE 2K23, like I play as the evil Doink. It was awesome. Like he smiles and then like suddenly he starts frowning and it's like all messed up like a horror film. Okay, that Doink was good, but then it became all fun and games when they got rid of him. So. The WWF, it was this was when I was a child. This was like the every wrestler has a job era.
Right.
You had a Mountie, you had a big boss man, you had it was a Cobb County guard.
Right.
You had a tax collector. a trash guy.
Yep.
I mean, you had all this crazy job gimmick stuff back then, and so is on one hand you're watching this stuff, okay, and then in WCW you got like Ricky Steamboat versus Rick Rude and Ric Flair and Sting and Vader, Cactus Jack, a young Steve Austin,
Right.
I mean, you had the future of wrestling in early WCW,
Yeah.
but it just wasn't
Triple H was there.
making money. Triple H,
Yeah.
that was a little bit later. That was like a little bit later that Triple H showed up.
Okay.
But anyway, so this is one of my favorite things about wrestling title history
Right.
here. This might be my favorite story.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
So Ric Flair, a great wrestling story, starts with Ric Flair.
Of course it does.
Okay. Ric Flair had a falling out with Jim Herd, vice president, executive vice president, and was fired from WCW on July the 1st, 1991.
Right.
While still being recognized as the NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
Yes.
Okay. Ric Flair kept the belt because back in those days, the wrestler would pay a bond to carry the title.
Right.
And if
It
you
was like a
lost the
deposit.
belt, it was a deposit.
Yeah.
If you lost the belt, you lost your money.
Right.
Or if you stole the belt or whatever,
Right.
you lost your money. It's just a protection thing.
Yep.
So Flair now in wrestling, wrestlers lose belts all the time.
Yeah.
And fans steal them, and all kind of stuff happens.
Oh yeah, they get left in the middle of the street and everything.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's crazy. So, I mean, and Flair took the belt with him. Okay.
Sounds like he had a right to it.
Yeah, because he did. He did.
Yeah.
They had not returned his $25,000 bond that he paid on the belt. And a match was held for the vacated WCW World Heavyweight Championship within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But no mention was made of the NWA title. Flair was stripped of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship by their board of directors shortly after he signed on with the WWF in September of 91.
Okay. So going back just a little bit here. Okay, so Flair was still recognized as the NWA champion, but they had a match for the WCW championship.
Yes.
At this point, is that two different championships?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, they didn't say anything about. Yeah, it would have been two separate championships at that time, technically.
Could this have been what finally split the two belts, or merged them rather?
Well, we're getting into that.
Okay.
So yes, at that point in time, they were separate titles. Okay. Flair was stripped of the NWA World Heavyweight Championship by the board of directors. And it said a board had to be reconstituted. Most of the people had gone out of business or been bought out. So it wasn't until 1992 that you're right. That is when it was split up. In 1992, the NWA belt is when it came back.
Okay.
So this is what caused. This is basically what caused the split. The NWA at this point in time was such a mess that it's just so complicated here. So, I mean, the NWA basically existed, like I said, on paper. And they had to basically rebuild the NWA. But WCW pressed on.
Okay.
So that's where the split began. Okay. So the big gold belt. Ric Flair took that belt onto WWF programming, declaring himself to be the real world champion. Okay. Real world's heavyweight champion.
Yep.
It was brilliant.
Yes.
It was a brilliant move. And so Ric Flair is on WWF television with a belt that the fans know is the world title.
Yeah.
And WCW is making up their own new belt, trying to recover from this crap.
Yeah.
And Ric Flair's got their belt.
Was there any legal?
Oh, there was tons of legal issues with this. Okay.
It's
like, eventually what they had to do was, due to legal problems, they would have Ric Flair come out with, I believe, was the Intercontinental Championship.
Okay.
And they would blur it out on television. So the fans that were there live had to be really confused because Ric Flair's coming out wearing the Intercontinental title, holding it in the air.
Okay.
And fans at home are seeing this blurred out version of the Intercontinental title, but the blurring wasn't good, so you could still see that it was the Intercontinental title. All of this is due to lawsuits, but Ric Flair kept this gimmick going of being, the real world's heavyweight champion. But I mean, at first he was like,
I love this shit.
Yeah, at first he wasn't even, it wasn't even blurred. I mean, it was like full frontal, big gold belt.
Yep. So this was just clear that up. After the purchase in 2001 and the big gold belt showed up on WWF television, that was not the first time that belt showed up on WWE television, right?
No, it was not the first time.
This was the first time.
Although technically that was a different belt. It was a remade belt.
It was
the same title.
It was still called the big gold belt. It was
still big
title.
gold belt.
Right,
yeah,
right.
It was just so
there was about 10 years
replacement,
right?
Yeah,
but there was about 10 years in between its appearances.
Yeah,
on WWF TV.
So, and I'd have to look like when Booker T won that belt at the final Nitro
against.
It might have been the original big gold belt. I'd have to look at it to
Scott
know.
Steiner. Yep.
So this belt is on WWF television. That's insane.
Especially back then, because I mean, fans weren't smart like they are today, or like they were even in the early 2000s, because the dirt sheets were all over the internet at that point.
Yeah, it had to be really confusing. It was a devastating blow.
You didn't know
to WCW.
Yeah, I mean, watching it, you couldn't have known what was going on, and people had to have been speculating all kinds of things like, are the companies merging?
Yeah.
Did Vince buy him out in 1992 or 1990? What was the year? 91. So I mean, nobody knew.
Well,
nobody knew back then.
People had to wonder: was Ric Flair really still the champion?
Right.
Yeah.
Was there a crossover going on like in comic books?
Yeah. Like, well, that's another thing too. Okay, so Ric Flair's success in the WWF was him leaving WCW and everything damaged WCW, but it also helped WCW.
Okay.
Because for the longest time, and this was still the case even until like the NWO era.
Okay.
WCW wrestlers were viewed as being less than. WWF wrestlers.
Okay, so it was like minor leagues.
Yeah.
Compared to Vince's company.
The NWA was looked at as being less than.
Okay.
Compared to WWF. Even though they had the better wrestlers. So, look what happened to Dusty Rhodes when he went to the WWF.
Right.
I mean, he was treated like a joke, unfortunately.
Right.
He didn't carry any resentment for it because he made a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was out there just entertaining the fans and being a professional.
Right.
But, they made him wear polka dots and dance and crap.
Right.
So, Dusty Hardy Race didn't have the success in the WWF. Ric Flair shows up.
Yep.
And declares himself the real world champion, world's heavyweight champion. And then he wins their title twice.
Yep.
Okay. So, after winning the WWF championship, the real world's heavyweight champion was dropped. But there was a lawsuit going on preventing them from using the big gold belt on television, and that was eventually dropped because the belt was returned to WCW in 1992 in July.
Right.
According to Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when Flair left WCW, the company made a new WCW World Title. It says here in October of 1991, it was reported by the Wrestling Observer newsletter. And I got a lot of mixed feelings about Meltzer, but he's an important guy in wrestling. I mean, the first time that the word kayfabe was published in print was in his newsletter.
Okay.
In 1988. So 91, he reported, the newsletter reported that there was a tournament to determine a new champion was supposed to take place on November the 11th at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis at a television taping.
Yep.
Which would have began a cross-promotion deal between the WCW and United States Wrestling Association. Okay, this information got leaked. So we're getting into the era of dirt sheets.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned the internet and all that. Fans didn't know a whole lot.
Right.
Some fans did.
Yeah.
Some fans had access to dirt sheets.
Okay.
And these fans had some shoot knowledge of the business. Smart marks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then it the leak, Paul E. Dangerously, who's now Paul Heyman,
Yep.
Got suspended for 20 days and punished. Anyway, so that deal was canceled. So then in August of 1992, the NWA board authorized WCW and New Japan Pro Wrestling to hold a tournament to decide a new NWA World Heavyweight Champion using now the returned big gold belt. So you had the WCW title and you had the NWA title represented by the big gold belt.
Right.
WCW had its own belt. I can't describe it. It's just it was a WCW belt.
Right.
You can. It's on my WWE 2K23 video game. I gave it to Big Van Vader. It's you can look it up online what it looked like. A lot of history with that belt. It was the belt that Ron Simmons held, the first, recognized by WWE as the first Black World Heavyweight Champion. I mean,
right.
There's technically, that's another thing we could go into is Black World Champions. And
sure.
Stuff. So there's two world titles. Masahiro Chono won the belt. I remember watching wrestling around this time. And from 1992 to 1993, the NWA belt was defended in Japan and on WCW television. Flair returned to WCW and regained the belt from Barry Windham in July of 1993. That same year, WCW recognized Ric Flair. I hope I'm not butchering this name. Tatsumi Fujinami.
Mm-hmm. That sounds right.
It sounds familiar to me. That's how it's been said. NWA title changes in 91. But there were disputes between WCW management and the NWA board over a variety of issues in the summer of 93. One involved the storyline of having the title go to Rick Rude. So here we go.
Okay.
On September the 1st, 1993, WCW withdrew their membership from the NWA, but kept the title belt that they owned. Okay.
And this was the big gold belt.
The big gold belt. Okay. Our court battle decided that WCW could not continue to use the letters NWA to describe or promote the belt, but it did possess a right to the belt, physical belt, and its lineage. Okay.
Okay.
So once again, why is wrestling lineages important? They're so important that they're included in deals.
Yeah.
And legal matters and sales and business.
This wasn't kayfabe. This was a real life court deal.
Yeah. Real life deal. So basically, by this ruling, they dropped the NWA, but continued to bill it as the World Heavyweight Championship. And then it was referred to as the Big Gold Belt. And then it became the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship.
Okay.
So what in the hell is WCW International? It was recognized as the championship of a fictitious entity known as WCW International, replacing the NWA board.
Right.
And then it was unified with the WCW World Title in June of 1994, June the 23rd, in a match between Ric Flair and Sting, which I have the videotape.
The VHS tape.
VHS tape.
Okay.
Of that match at home. I have the whole pay-per-view of that at my parents', my dad's house.
All right.
So, that's why I can tell you. I can remember the match. I can remember what it looked like.
Right.
I mean, so, strange. At the time, it was strange to me because I was a child and I didn't understand the history behind the Big Gold Belt. Okay, so Ric Flair won that match against Sting. Sting had the international title.
Right.
WCW international title. And Ric Flair was carrying the WCW world title that he won from beating Big Van Vader earlier in December at Starrcade. Okay. So the winner of this match, the title was unified with the WCW title. But strangely to me as a child, Ric Flair started wearing the big gold belt to represent the WCW World Heavyweight Championship.
When it was the NWA Championship.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which became the International
Right.
Championship.
Right.
And then now is the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. So later on at Bash at the Beach or Beach Blast, whatever it was called at the time in 94, when Hulk Hogan beat Ric Flair shortly after that match.
Right.
I believe like a month later, Hulk Hogan won the big gold belt.
And that championship remained the big gold belt through the rest of WCW.
Yeah, until WCW died. I mean, of course, they had replaced it a little bit towards the end.
Right.
But it remained the championship. And when the WWE took the WCW championship to the the WWE.
Yep.
It was the big gold belt.
Yep.
And then they created their own belt called the World Heavyweight Championship. That basically was the big gold belt with their logo at the top added to it.
Okay.
And slightly smaller.
Oh, wasn't
as big.
Okay, so it was a new physical belt.
Yeah,
it was a replacement.
Yeah. So, like, if you go on the when I play WWE 2K23, there's like a million belts you can choose from.
Okay.
But you can also download belts.
Okay.
And one of the things that I downloaded was the big gold belt.
Right. Well, of course.
And so they had the World Heavyweight Championship. They had the WCW World Heavyweight Championship with the NWO logo on it.
Yeah.
But I wanted the big gold belt.
Right.
Without the WWE logo. I just wanted to have it.
Right.
Although I would use the logo, the WWE logo,
right,
on there because I'm playing a WWE game. So even though I do have a lot of AEW wrestlers downloaded on there,
right,
but when I press L1, they don't do the coffin drop.
No coffin drop.
Yeah, no coffin drop.
Okay.
So, so there was a lot that happened in WCW in a very short time concerning the belts.
In a decade, pretty much.
Yeah.
Up until WWF purchased them.
Yeah.
And then even still, things happened to that belt.
Yeah.
After the purchase.
Even after the purchase, things happened to the belt.
Right.
And I wish they would bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they would declare that Seth Rollins' belt has the lineage. Well, it's probably too late now to do that.
Right.
I was waiting. I was checking Wikipedia.
Yeah.
To see, I would check it to see, and it would constantly say, undetermined if it carries the lineage.
Okay.
Undetermined if it carries the lineage, and then eventually it was clarified that it didn't carry the lineage, and I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
Like this belt. See, to me, I understand the WWE title has the lineage back to George Hackenschmidt in 1905.
Yeah.
But the world title.
Yeah.
The one that came out of WCW, that became the World Heavyweight Championship, to me, was always the real world title.
Right.
And I was really disappointed in WWE for doing that, even though they did model the belt after the big gold belt.
Right.
Which I appreciated that. That wasn't enough.
Yeah. Now, had they done that, okay, as far as the lineage, what would have happened to the belt that Roman Reigns has right now? As far as lineage, would it have moved? Would it have been a splinter belt?
So, if they made Seth Rollins' world title the same lineage of the World Heavyweight Championship from 2002 to 2013, then it would have. I don't know what the word would be. What would it be called? The opposite of a merge? Unmerged.
Well, I mean, it kind of sounds like a split in a way.
Yeah. What would have happened would have been that the WWE title would have maintained its own history and own lineage back to 1963.
Okay.
And the new world title would have carried the lineage through the World Heavyweight Championship. By the way, interesting tidbit of knowledge. When Rey Mysterio won the World Heavyweight Championship, they briefly changed the name officially to the World Championship because he wasn't a heavyweight.
I did not know that. What year was that?
Oh, God, I can't remember. That I don't know. It was, I want to say it was the late 2000s.
Okay, so did that actually do anything to the lineage? Or was it just a brief
It didn't do
name
anything
change?
to the lineage.
Okay.
It was Vince McMahon and his weird-ass...
fetish for big people.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's what it was.
Yeah.
He couldn't stand it.
Oh, you can't call it a heavyweight championship if the champion is 180 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, he couldn't stand it that Rey Mysterio, who is like, if not the best luchador in wrestling history, in American wrestling history at least, the second best luchador in American wrestling history. You know, I'm not going to say they're the best luchador in the world because, I mean, there's some great, you know, luchadors in Mexico that stayed there.
Right.
But in American wrestling history, you know, Rey Mysterio ranks up at the top, you know, and him winning that belt, there was no shame to it. But Vince McMahon, he probably had convulsions about it, you know. Because he didn't weigh 245 pounds.
Right.
There we go. So the next episode, where I plan on talking more about what happened to the WWE title when WCW was purchased.
Okay.
I plan on talking about what happened to the WCW title when the WWE purchased WCW.
All right, so we'll focus mainly on the purchase and how that affected the championships. Okay.
And then the aftermath.
Okay.
The Unified Championship, the World Heavyweight Championship, and the current WWE Championship.
Okay.
We're going to focus on that. And then, you know, maybe share some thoughts as far as the current day and what could be done to you know, just continue to bring prestige to that lineage. And you know what? I now that I'm thinking about it, I think I need to talk about the Impact title, and I need to talk about the NWA title in recent years. Also, here's this. There's another belt that claims lineage to, and we'll talk about this too, to back all the way to 1905.
Okay.
ECW.
Okay, give us a brief explanation of that one.
When Shane Douglas won basically the NWA championship and the Eastern championship wrestling belt and said, screw this, and then picked up the ECW championship, said, I'm the ECW champion. That created a splinter lineage where the ECW title shared a history with the 1905 championship held by George Hackenschmidt.
Okay.
Frank Gotch. Lou Thez. Taz. Rob Van Dam.
Oh, my God.
Vince McMahon held that belt. Ezekiel Jackson. You even know who that is?
No, I don't know who that is.
See? Last guy to hold the ECW title when it was in that terrible WWE version.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Also, talking about belts that have that are world championships, interesting tidbit here. The NXT title was briefly recognized as a world championship.
As its own world championship.
Yep.
So was it, did it share lineage with anything, or was it just this brand new belt?
It was its own belt.
Okay.
But it has its own lineage.
Right.
You know? Actually, the NXT belt has one of the best lineages around.
Okay.
With some of the people that's held that belt. So, Lance, did you have any questions for me before we close this podcast?
I think I asked everything during the show.
All right, then.
I think we'll leave everything to the next episode.
Sounds good to me.
I guess
then
we'll wrap it up there.
Sounds good.
All right. So that was Glenn Ritchie. This is Lance Vaughn. And this was our first episode of Ring Chronicles. Thanks for listening.
Have a good one.